Welcome to this evening's Committee of Adjustment meeting. Members of the public, applicants, agents, and staff may be participating in this evening's event either in person or virtually via Zoom. For those attending via Zoom, please note that it is our standard practice for members of the public to have their cameras off and microphones muted until it is time for that member to speak. Township staff can assist with muting microphones. If you require assistance, please use the chat function and ask staff. I am also pleased to advise that this is being broadcast live on the Township's YouTube channel, where a recording of the meeting will be available. Note the Township does not have the ability to edit the live stream or recorded version of the meeting. Public meetings have been called and notice circulated in accordance with the Planning Act with respect to applications for minor variance and/or consent. The purpose of public meetings are to inform and provide the public with the opportunity to ask questions and to express views with respect to the applications. The format of the public meeting is as follows. Township staff will introduce the application and report all correspondence received. Next, the applicant or their agent will present any relevant information. Next, Township staff will then provide further information and clarify any statements of the applicant or their agent. Following that, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And finally, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification of the application. After all comments have been received, the committee will consider the application with due regard to the presentations and views expressed this evening. The committee will then do one of three things: approve the application, deny the application, or defer the application pending receipt of additional information. Specified persons who have provided oral submissions or written objections but disagree with the committee's decision on the application may appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as entitled under the Planning Act. The deadline for an appeal of consent applications is 20 days within the giving of notice, and for minor variances within 20 days of the decision date. When commenting on an application, please first give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that the names and addresses of those individuals who speak at the meeting will appear within the meeting minutes, which are public documents. If you wish to receive a copy of a decision, please leave your name and address with Township staff. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. If we can get a motion for the adoption of the minutes. Motion COA 2024-055, moved by member Mossy, seconded by member Vandergeest, that the minutes of the September 17th, 2024 Committee of Adjustment meeting be adopted as printed and distributed. We are carried. We don't have any adjourned applications, so for our application for consent B-12-24, would Township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated?
Thank you, Chair. The first application this evening is consent application B-12-24 Lowry for lands located at 3118 Mossy Stonecrop Trail. This application does propose the creation of one new residential lot by severing off a portion of the subject lands, which currently contain one of the two existing single detached dwellings and the lands that are associated with that residential use exclusively. The table underneath that part of the slide does describe the dimensions of the severed and the retained lands. As a result of circulating the notice, the Fire and Emergency Services Department, Public Works Department, Clerk's Office, and the MTO all had no comments or objections. The Building Division did state that the sewage system and well locations will need to be confirmed to ensure compliance with the Ontario Building Code setback requirements, just so that we can ensure that those features would be fully contained on the proposed severed lands and not on any of the retained. So that is the summary and the correspondence that was received. Thank you.
I now call on the applicant and/or their agent to please present the application together with any relevant information. Please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen. If you're in person, then you can come up to the podium or the microphone up there. If you want to hold that microphone, you can, whatever you feel is most comfortable.
And click the next slide. Let's tell you. Okay, cool. All right. So, okay. Yeah, so as Brad mentioned, the applicant's planner for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and consent to sever off an existing single detached dwelling at 3118 Mossy Stonecrop Trail. So this is a, as you can see here, the site is approximately 19.2 hectares in area. It's located in the township of Seven, west of Lake Kukaching. It is bound by Highway 11 to the north, Mossy Stonecrop Trail to the east, Lake Kukaching and Piccadilly Lane to the south, and Crescent Bay Road to the south and west. It contains two long existing dwellings, is largely undeveloped, covered by woodland vegetation and a provincially significant wetland, the Green Island Bay Marsh. There are also two streams intersecting the site. The site is currently only being used for residential purposes. In terms of the land use classification, the site is governed by the official plans of the County of Simcoe and Township of Seven. The county official plan designates the site as mostly greenlands with a rural designation along the central area of its southern boundary. The township official plan designates the site as a combination of rural and shoreline residential and greenland with streams intersecting the site, designated as environmental protection area. The township official plan shows the proposed severed dwelling in the rural designation and the other dwelling in the shoreline residential designation. Next slide, please. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the majority of the site, inclusive of the proposed lot, is zoned as greenlands within an approximately 2 hectare area on the southwestern tip of the site, zoned as rural. Next slide, please. In terms of the proposal, the project is to sever off a single lot on the southern side of the site containing an existing dwelling, which is shown on the image there. A zoning bylaw amendment is required to facilitate the severance, proposed to change from the Greenland zone to the residential 1 zone, and a zone exception to allow for a smaller lot size of 3,000 meters squares as opposed to 4,000 meters squared. The severed lot will contain the existing long-standing dwelling with its own private services, will be a rectangular shape having a depth of 50 meters and a frontage of 60 meters. The size and location of the lot has been determined to avoid the wetland area. No development, vegetation removal, or alteration to the use of the land is proposed. So there's essentially no change to what is currently happening on the ground. The proposed lot will be, sorry, I've already said that. Slide 6, please. So this is an image of the dwelling to be severed. Next slide, please. A copy of the draft this is a copy of the draft severance sketch, which shows the retained lot in yellow. The lot is sized to avoid the wetland area, which has been determined based off an ecological impact study. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The lot on the southern part of the site is proposed to change from greenlands to residential 1. The residential 1 zone is generally applied to properties on larger lots with single detached residential dwellings. This is also consistent with the zoning on similar sized properties in the surrounding environment, including to the south of the site and north of Highway 11. Next slide, please. In support of the application was an environmental impact study and planning justification report. The environmental impact study concluded that the proposed lot arrangement was determined to ensure the natural heritage features are confined to the retained parcel. The EIS has determined that because the proposed severed lot is located outside of the wetland and significant woodlands environments, that there will be no impact upon them. This is further ensured by the fact the project involves no additional development, no grading or clearing of vegetation, and no alteration of use, and so the project, if approved, would result in no physical change on the ground. Next slide, please. A planning justification report was prepared. In terms of the scale, type, and location, it has been assessed as being compatible with the relevant policies of the PPS, County Official Plan, and Township Official Plan. Proposed lot arrangement has been determined to ensure the natural heritage features are confined to the retained parcel as advised by the EIS. The residential one zone is considered appropriate, consistent with the zoning in similar sized properties. The smaller lot was decided to ensure avoidance of the wetland feature. So overall, the consent to sever and zoning bylaw amendment are supported by the land use planning analysis and associated environmental impact study, and is considered to be of a type, scale, and location generally supported under the planning policy documents, does not result in any negative impact to natural heritage features or functions, and in our opinion, represents good land use planning. So that's overview. Yeah, so if you guys have comments, or do I continue going? Oh. Well, I have read the staff report. Yeah, so we're on receipt of that comments, and these will be replied to as part of the ongoing staff review and application. So in terms, you indicated that we need to respond to the policies of the Golden Horseshoe Plan, as we indicated under the county official plan, we were in the rural designation and in fact in the Greenlands designation. So we will update our planning report, but our response will be in relation to the provincial planning statement, which will be coming into effect in 5 days. And we will also respond to the township policies, as you indicated. And in regard to the rezoning of the retained lands, yes, we agree that because those retained lands are in the Greenlands designation, and as a result of the new parcel, the lot size is changing, that we'll need to seek an exemption for that. So we will update our planning report accordingly. And we will also seek a peer review of the EIS and update the policy assessment as needed. Just want to highlight that this application is solely to separate a long-standing residential use from a larger lot, also containing a long-standing residential dwelling, and that no development is being proposed. And we seek that you defer decision on this application until we have provided the outstanding information.
Yeah. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant or their agent, or any recommended conditions as applicable?
Thank you, Chair. So the applicant's kind of gone over everything here, so I will be brief in my presentation. Just sort of skipping ahead here to show the committee some site pictures taken from, this is actually on Crescent Bay Road, where the existing dwelling is that is proposed to be severed off. Just standing on the road, sort of looking at the dwelling from the east and west sides and straight on. So you can see that existing dwelling already in existence there. These are the lands that are proposed to be severed off through this application. As explained through the staff report, planning staff are just seeking an updated planning and environmental justification to address that small discrepancy in the designation of the severed lands. We are, aware of those policy changes that are anticipated to come into effect in 5 days. So there may need to be, sort of a lesser change, but still just looking at making sure that that designation is assessed appropriately. For those reasons, staff are recommending deferral of this application pending an updated planning and environmental justification, including the peer review of that EIS at the expense of the applicant per the township's normal practice. I do have a recommended motion if the committee would like that. Thank you.
Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party when commenting. Please give your name and address for the minutes. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare that the public portion of the application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on the application? If we can get a motion. Motion COA 2024-056, moved by member Hiles, seconded by member Hawkins, that staff report D24-037 be received, and further that in the matter of consent application B-12-24, the application be deferred pending updated planning and environmental justification, including peer review of the environmental impact study at the expense of the applicant. We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You're free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as committee moves on to the next application. Would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for application for consent B-13-24?
Thank you, Chair. So as seen on the screen here, I have included, for context, a picture of the proposed right-of-way. So as stated in the staff report, application B-13-24 contemplates a requested consent to create a legal right-of-way over an existing driveway as shown in red on the screen over a portion of 2242 Oakley Sideroad, being the servient lands, in favor of the Black River Road Users Association to provide vehicular access to 2622 Oakley Side Road, the dominant lands being that vacant piece to the rear of the property. The proposed right-of-way would have an approximate width of 6 meters and an approximate length of 690.5 meters. No new development is proposed as a result of this application. There were some comments received in correspondence to the application. No objections were received from the building division or the public works department. The township clerk has confirmed that the Stewarts, the sort of head of the Black River Road Users Association, have an existing license of occupation over an unopened township road allowance, which allows access to properties along McLean Lake. At the end of the proposed right-of-way over 2242 and 2262 Oakley Side Road. The clerk has indicated no concerns with the proposal as it's required to legally access the township road allowance for which they have the license of occupation over. The Fire and Emergency Services Department would like to remind property owners that their individual driveways and private roads should be a minimum of 4 meters in clearance width and overhead to allow adequate room for emergency vehicle access, as well as a turnaround should the driveway or private road be longer than 90 meters. In response to the application, the County of Simcoe has also provided comments. As stated in the staff report, the county provides a summary of the applicable policy from the county official plan. They essentially defer to staff and the committee to confirm that the application conforms with all the applicable policy. The applicant's agent is in attendance this evening and does wish to address the committee.
Thank you. I now call on the applicant and or their agent to please present the application together with any relevant information. Please unmute yourself and turn your camera on if you'd like. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Josh Morgan. I'm a registered professional planner with Morgan Planning and Development. Here tonight representing the Black River Road Users Association and also the owners of 2242 Oakley Side Road, being Dale and Lenore McKean. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so I will share my screen, but I won't go through the entire presentation. I think I will just go to the pertinent slides. So I think just further to Emily's presentation, the purpose of the consent application is to establish an access easement in favor of the Black River Road Users Association over a portion of the property known municipally as 2242 Oakley Side Road. And
Josh,
22, yes?
You have the meeting thing over top of your slides. If we can't see.
Oh, how's that?
Much
Is
better.
that better? Thanks for the heads up. Okay, so yeah, the purpose of this consent application is just to establish an access easement in favor of the Road Users Association over 2242 Oakley Sideroad. And the access easement, as Emily mentioned, is proposed atop of an existing driveway, which provides access across 2242 Oakley Sideroad to the lands to the north. 2242 Oakley Sideroad is owned by Dale and Lenore McKean. And importantly, the BRRUA, the Black River Road Users Association, and the McKeans executed an agreement in June of 2024, which describes the easement. So the McKeans and the Road Users Association have a legal agreement in place, and this consent application, and hopefully the approval of this consent application will is sort of in accordance with that agreement. So the next slide here, this is just one of the conditions is for a reference plan to be prepared. That reference plan is already complete. And that was submitted as part of this application. So it's plan 51R40981. And what you see on the screen here being part one, that's the 6 meter wide driveway, which currently exists. And so this survey essentially just illustrates and describes what will be the future easement. And this is just an image of the subject property and the location of that existing driveway over which the easement will be applied. And so just concluding remarks, the easement will permit members of the Black River Road Users Association to use the existing driveway for vehicular and pedestrian use, thereby providing permanent road access to their properties. The application is consistent with the 2020 and in 5 days, the 2024 PPS. It also conforms with the growth plan, the township's official plan, and the County of Simcoe's official plan. And in my opinion, establishing the access easement over an existing driveway to service existing lots of record is good land use planning. And that concludes my presentation for this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Do township staff have to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant and or their agent, or any recommended conditions as applicable?
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Morgan provided a good overview of the application, so I'll skip forward a few slides. So as discussed, the servient lands are 242 Oakley Sideroad, and the dominant lands seeking an easement over those lands are 2622 Oakley Sideroad, owned by the Black River Road Users Association. So this is just a close-up of the aerial imagery of the two subject property. Again, this is the proposed right-of-way. As indicated by Mr. Morgan, the right-of-way routing is intentionally located over an existing driveway, so there are no additional environmental impacts associated with the application anticipated, and no development associated with the application as it is an existing situation. The proposed application just seeks to legalize the vehicular access. So as outlined in the staff report, the proposal appears to comply with the PPS growth plan, the county and township official plans, and the zoning bylaw. No new development is proposed as a result of this application. So for those reasons, planning and development staff have no objections to the provisional approval of the application as presented, subject to the recommended conditions outlined in the staff report. Those being a reference plan of the severed parcel be prepared and duly registered by an Ontario land surveyor. Mr. Morgan has indicated that that step has already been completed ahead of time. A copy of the electronic registration and preparation draft deed for the right-of-way be provided to the Secretary Treasurer to prepare the certificate. The owner solicitor shall ensure that the right-of-way is legally added to the appropriate subject properties. That municipal taxes shall be paid in full up to the date of the requested issuance of the certificate. That any fees associated with the application shall be borne by the owner. And that the conditions set out be completed within 2 years of the date of its decision per the requirements of the Planning Act. I do have a motion. Should committee wish to consider it?
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who either have questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application, please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who wish to either have questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare that the public portion of this application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on the application? If we can get a motion. Motion COA 2024-057, moved by member Vandergeest, seconded by member Hiles, that staff report D24038 be received and that application for consent B1324 be provisionally approved, subject to the recommended conditions set out in attachment 5 to staff report D24038. We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. Would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for application for minor variance A1924?
Thank you, Chair. So this application for minor variance at 2674 Westshore Crescent. The application does request minor variances to facilitate the construction of a detached garage with an attached carport. There are 4 minor variances which were initially sought for this application that notice was circulated for. They do include a increased accessory building size of 112 square meters, and accessory building or structure lot coverage of 15%, a reduced interior yard setback of 0.5 meters, and a reduced rear yard setback of 1.5 meters. The Fire and Emergency Services Department and Clerk's Office both had no objections or comments on this application. The Public Works Department did have some concern with the initially requested reduced setback to the Westshore Crescent road allowance. The Building Division had some comments related to the spatial separation requirements of the Ontario Building Code, as well as concerns related to construction and maintenance access around the building, together with stormwater management dealing with the runoff from the roof. And lastly, the Severn Sound Environmental Association advised that they had no concerns with this, although it is within an intake protection zone, given the vulnerability score of the property and the proposed use of the lands. I would like now to just let the committee know that the applicants, since the giving of notice, the applicants have retained Morgan Planning and Development to act as their agents for this application. And Mr. Morgan does have a presentation that he would like to present the committee with this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on the applicant and or their agent to please present the application together with any relevant information. Please unmute yourself and turn your camera on if you'd like. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Good evening. Thanks again, committee members. Josh Morgan here from Morgan Planning. Yeah, thanks, Brad, for your overview. And yeah, I was actually retained on the file. I suppose I was first contacted about the file over the weekend and then was formally retained this morning when Mr. Van Amelsvoort, who's the contractor representing the applicant, reviewed the staff report over the weekend and at that time identified or became aware that there were some concerns expressed from the Public Works Department in particular and also the Planning Department related to the original submission. So Mr. Van Amelsvoort and I met this morning, and Mr. Van Amelsvoort had communicated with Mr. Tellier, who's the owner of the property, and they agreed to decrease the size of the accessory building. I'll just call it a garage, to decrease the size of the accessory building and to increase the setbacks. So originally, as the application was submitted, the garage was proposed at 112 square meters. And it was proposed with an interior side yard setback of 0.5 meters and a rear yard setback, which is to the road, of only 1.5 meters. So the revised proposal now is to decrease the size of the garage from 112 square meters to 100 square meters, and to increase the side yard setback from 0.5 meters to 1.5 meters, which means it now complies with the zoning bylaw, and to increase the rear yard setback, which is the road setback in this case, because it's a shoreline lot, from the original request of 1.5 meters to 4 meters. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen so that we can see that. Can everybody see my screen now with the table?
Yes, if you could possibly zoom in a little bit, it would be much easier.
Sure. How's that?
Much better.
Okay. So this table was actually in the staff report. So the first three columns, we'll say the provision column, the bylaw column, and the original request column, these are in the staff report. I added the fourth column, so the column to the right. So this outlines the revised request. So the original request was for 3 variances. The original request was for 4 variances. Now the request is for 3 variances. And the other variances have been reduced in what is being asked for. So as I mentioned, the request is now, in terms of the size of the building, has gone from 112 square meters to 100 square meters. That would result in a garage that is 80% of the size of the dwelling. And I think that's important because the comments in the staff report, the planning department's comments, they express some concern of sort of the hierarchy or the relationship between the primary dwelling and the originally proposed garage. Planning staff were concerned that the original proposal that the garage was sort of was too large in relation to the dwelling. So we've decreased that percentage now to 80%. And the zoning bylaw permits 75% as of right. So our proposal is to go from 75% to 80%. And in my opinion, that's a minor variance and is reasonable in nature. And then the accessory building lot coverage would be the second variance. The original request was for 15%, and we've decreased that now to 12.5%. And as I mentioned, we no longer are seeking relief for an interior side yard setback. The proposal has been revised to comply. And the rear yard setback, or the setback to the road, the original request was for 1.5 meters, and now the proposal is to increase that setback to 4 meters. And I'm aware that the Public Works Department was originally concerned with the proposed 1.5 meter setback from that road frontage, and we've increased that now by 2.5 meters as a result of Public Works' original concern. So just taking us off screen share here. So in my opinion, the revised proposal, I think, has addressed the concerns that were expressed by planning staff. I did meet with the planning department earlier today to review them. I think if the committee were to ask the planning department how they felt about the revised proposal, I'll let planning department speak for themselves on that, but I feel confident that they were happy with the revisions. And so I'll just speak just briefly as a planner to the 4 tests of the Planning Act and why I believe the 4 tests of a minor variance as outlined in the Planning Act have been met. So the first test would be that the general intent and purpose of the official plan has been maintained. As the committee is aware, there are 2 official plans which we have to have regard for, and the Township of Severn being the County of Simcoe's official plan and the Township of Severn's official plan. And the staff report was already satisfied that the intent of the official plans had been met, and I agree with staff's position on that. The second test, of course, is that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw had been maintained. Staff were originally hesitant and did not believe that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw had been maintained with the original submission. But because we have decreased the size of the garage and eliminated one of the setback variances and significantly reduced the second setback variance, it's my opinion that this proposal is now meets the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. So that's the second test. The third test is whether or not the variance is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land. In my opinion, a garage of 1,080 square feet or 100 square meters is a reasonable size for a garage. In my opinion, the setback relief that we're seeking from the road is reasonable at 4 meters. And I do not think that the coverage is out of line with the community, the surrounding community. So I believe that this is a appropriate development, and therefore that the fourth test has been satisfied. And finally, or sorry, the third test, and finally the fourth test, are these variances minor in nature? I evaluated each of the four. Now there are three. I did not think that the fourth variance, the side yard variance, was minor in nature, but that's now been wiped off the table. But I am of the opinion that the remaining three variances are minor in nature. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that members of the public or that the committee have. And I would ask that you make a decision on it tonight. I know that the staff report recommended a deferral, but I hope that these changes have provided a level of comfort to staff and to members of the committee so that a decision can be made tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant and or their agent, or any recommended conditions as applicable?
Thank you, Chair. So further to the staff report, township staff were initially requesting or recommending denial of the application, but we're open to the possibility of a deferral, as we were of the opinion that 3 of the 4 tests were not initially satisfied by the original proposed minor variances. Now seeing this revised proposal from Morgan Planning regarding the proposed detached garage, staff are of the opinion that it does address a number of those concerns that were initially identified. The building division had some concerns, especially with respect to spatial separation, which requires additional building code requirements when you're building less than 0.6 meters from a property line. The applicant has now increased that to the zoning bylaw requirement of 1.5 meters, so it is in compliance. Therefore, we are of the opinion that it addresses those concerns related to construction and maintenance, access around the building, addressing stormwater management from the runoff from the roof, etc. So generally speaking, those building division comments have been addressed at this point. Further, township staff did circulate this revised proposal for the increased setback to the Westshore Crescent road allowance to the Public Works Department, who has advised that they are comfortable with a 4-meter setback and would have no objection to that. Given those 2 matters being addressed and the justification that Mr. Morgan has provided with respect to the 4 tests, and the fact that township staff were initially of the opinion that this application did conform to or not conflict with either of the applicable provincial policy documents, being the PPS and the growth plan, as well as being satisfied that the application did maintain the general intent and purpose of both the county and the township official plan, township staff would have no objections to the committee considering the request from the applicant this evening to approve the application should you choose. And we do have a revised motion to that effect if the committee would like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party when commenting. Please give your name and address for the minutes. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare that the public portion of the application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on the application? Are we amendable to Mark?
I would support the bringing forward a motion for the revised application that was presented by Mr. Morgan this evening.
So if we can get a motion. Does everybody want to take a minute to read it?
I could read the motion if the committee would like.
I can read it out loud too, if that, I just didn't know if you wanted time to digest a little bit before. I'll just read it, and then if you want time, let me know. Motion COA 2024-058, moved by Member Hodkins, seconded by Member Mossy, that staff report D24039 be received, and that the additional correspondence and justification from Mr. Josh Morgan of Morgan Planning and Development be received regarding the revision to the minor variance application, and further that the following minor variances to zoning bylaw 2010-65 as amended be approved to facilitate the construction of a detached private garage with a carport. 1, a maximum accessory building size, section 3.2.5 of 100.3 square meters. 2, a maximum accessory building / structure lot coverage, section 3.2.8 of 12.5%. And 3, a minimum rear yard setback, section 6.4 of 4 meters. And further that minor variances be subject to the following conditions: municipal taxes be paid to date, and that the construction shall be substantially compliance with the plans submitted with the application, accounting for the size reduction proposed in the revised application, and that the existing vegetation on the lands be preserved and enhanced as much as possible. If we can get and we are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. Would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for application for minor variance A-20-24?
Thank you, Chair. So the next application and final application on the agenda this evening is A-20-24 for the lands recognized as 2 Gray Street. The application is to contemplate a requested minor variance to facilitate the construction of an accessory dwelling unit. It's proposed as a 2nd-story addition to an existing single-story commercial building, The variance would seek to provide 0 on-site required parking, where 1 parking space for each accessory dwelling unit in a commercial building is required. The following correspondence has been received. The chief building official has indicated that following receipt of satisfactory information pertaining to the record of site condition in Ontario Regulation 15304, the applicant is advised that any future proposed construction will have specific construction requirements that are needed when building close to neighboring buildings, as well as when different occupancies are located in the same building. The existing building may need specific modifications to meet the requirements of the Ontario Building Code. They further note that no design plans were reviewed at this time. No further comments were received from the township clerk nor the Public Works and Fire and Emergency Services departments. The applicant is in attendance this evening and may wish to address the committee.
I now call on the applicant to please present their application together with any relevant information. If you want to come up to use the microphone.
Hello, Committee of Adjustment and Severn Township Planning staff. I am Stephanie Kennedy. I am a long-term resident of Severn Township, and I am the sole shareholder of Matchedash Bay Company, also known as 2 Gray Street, and the owner of Copper Pot Nuts, existing within 2 Gray Street. I'm really excited about my upcoming project. I'm planning to build an accessory apartment above 2 Gray Street. And in order to do this, I need zoning bylaw requires 1 parking space on a property that we cannot accommodate any because there is no land. Although, Emily, if I could have you pull up the, what would I like? The survey? I would appreciate it. So before I even, perfect, thank you. Before I even get to the survey, I would like to address a newly risen situation in regards to the RSC exemption letter that was provided by Campion Consulting Company to analyze the project and assess the building's past use in consideration for the exemption of an RSC, which was completed. Some concerns have arose since that letter was received by Township. But I am grateful that the building department mentioned in their comments that in order for the building permit to move forward, any issue with that RSC exemption letter will have to be dealt with. So I would love to set that aside this evening and focus on what I'm here to do, which is request the single parking spot to be reduced to 0. And so you'll see here is the survey of the land. So in front of the building, if you look at the building that I've drawn the lines across, that's the building that we're looking to build on top of. And in front of that building, we have exactly enough room for a parking spot, well, a little more than, but 7 meters by a little 3.58 meters. The issue with using that land for a parking spot is centrally located in that space is the entrance to our retail store. Also, directly across the street, a curb was installed about 8 to 10 years ago, and the Home Hardware no longer can maneuver their delivery truck into their receiving area without cutting across our property, which, we're happy to accommodate. Also, within that space, we have laid out and maintained public parking for 6 bicycles. So the township provides a 4 bicycle rack, and we've added a 2 bicycle rack. So we're hoping with all the public bicycle parking that we are allowing, that maybe we can, trade off a little somewhere here. Bear with me, please. I am sorry that I'm reading to you from paper tonight, but I don't want to miss a single detail that may be important to you. So I'm going to continue looking down, and I apologize. So this original building, if you aren't aware of the history of it, was built by the town of Coldwater. It was originally the courthouse, the police station. It had 3 jail cells, and it was also the township office. It was later as well the fire hall, and then the side where Copper Pot exists was built to store the fire truck, and the rear portion was built as the fireman's quarters. Now, planning staff has encouraged me to hire a planner for this minor variance application. And without the opinion of a planner, I understand that it is hard for them to justify my requests. But as all of you know, expenses for projects can get out of hand incredibly quickly. And this request, from my perspective, is incredibly minor in nature. And I'm hoping that I can explain to you fairly why the 4 tests are met without the assistance of a planner this evening. First, to address it being minor in nature, I would like to point out that my request is exactly 16.5 meters square, the required measurement of a parking spot. I'm sure we can all agree that itself is a pretty small amount of space. Over the last 10 years, 10 parking spaces have been removed from the downtown core of Coldwater without any consultation with the community or businesses located within, which only proves that accommodating parking in our community is minor in nature, or consultations would have been held. Even with the removal of these 10 parking spots, parking in Coldwater is still not an issue, or finding parking in Coldwater is not. As well, we have an underutilized parking spot located within 150 meters of 2 Gray Street along Fire Hall Lane, which offers approximately 40 parking spaces, but on average only has 15 cars parked there daily. So public parking exists within our community to offset any accommodation this minor variance may mitigate. We are able to maintain the general nature of the bylaw because zoning bylaw 4.2.9, location of required parking spaces, also offers an alternative. Bracket, located on a lot within 150 meters of the site, provided the parking facilities are legally secured for that use to the satisfaction of the township, just like the lot I have previously described. To quickly cover over the remaining tests to justify my request, I will touch on the project fitting into the official plan of the township, county, and province. When it comes to housing, all 3 have a pretty clear perspective that more is required, as well as more types of housing options, and that those housing options should be located within settlement areas, and that the focus of development and redevelopment should also occur within settlement areas and or commercial corridors. My final sorry, bear with me a second here. And for my final test, to justify this project is desirable and appropriate use of lands, this is a single-story building with 2-story mixed-use residential commercial on either side. If you're unaware of where 2 Gray Street is located, we have the main commercial corridor of Main Street Coldwater. We have the Home Hardware on the corner of 2 Gray Street and the Main Street, and we are located directly behind the Home Hardware. Bear with me while I find my place, please. So Severn itself has objectives in their township approved bylaws to encourage development and redevelopment in commercial corridors, all of which this proposed project achieves entirely. The province and the county repeatedly throughout the official plan and the provincial policy statement coming into effect within 5 days that I learned tonight promote efficient development and wise use of land, as well as identifying the need for mixed housing types to meet all of the housing needs in the community. There is a strong focus on public transit and building complete communities within Severn Township, the county, and the province, reducing the need for vehicular traffic, which in turn reduces the need for parking, which again proves that overall this request is minor in nature. If there's anyone with any questions, I would be happy to answer. And I mean, basically, I'm here tonight. I'm grateful for your time, and I do request that you propose a motion in favor of my application. But if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant, or any recommended conditions as applicable?
Thank you, Chair. So I can add some additional information from the staff report related to the application. So I'll just jump back here. So as seen on the screen and as described by Ms. Kennedy, the lands are located along 2 Gray Street, just beside the Home Hardware building, if everyone's familiar with that. This is an aerial image of the property with the lands outlined in red, also identifying the surrounding uses of the property. The lands are located within the sort of downtown commercial core of Coldwater. This is a site plan submitted with the application by Ms. Kennedy. So the hatching indicated on the site plan is the approximate location of the 2nd-story proposed accessory apartment. This is a photo taken on site by staff of the existing building. So if you can see here, the accessory apartment would be located over the existing commercial building here. And this is the concept elevation provided by the applicant with their application, just demonstrating what a potential addition would look like on the 2nd story. So as outlined in the staff report, further information is requested to demonstrate compliance with applicable policy, including Ontario Regulation 15304, as well as the 4 tests for a minor variance. I did just want to note that while the record of site condition information is required for building permit, it is also required to accompany any Planning Act application that proposes a more sensitive use, such as a residential use above a commercial building. So that's set out in section B13 that requires this information to accompany any Planning Act application, such as a minor variance contemplating that change in use to a more sensitive use. And as indicated, the zoning bylaw and township official plan do provide for alternatives for off-street parking within 150 meters of the subject property. However, that is required to be secured through a parking agreement with the township. That does involve the payment of securities to essentially create a parking space specifically for that use in the downtown core. Essentially, that secures for that use because a public parking space can't be used for personal residential use. It's supposed to be used for the entirety of all of the downtown community and businesses. So for those reasons, further justification is required or requested to demonstrate how the requested 0 parking on site without the parking agreement would meet the prescribed policy per the Planning Act. as well as those additional comments provided on the Ontario regulation to the applicant. It's my understanding that the chief building official was in contact with the applicant on Friday of this week to assist with providing that additional information that would need to be provided to satisfy the applicable policies of Ontario Regulation 15304, as well as Section B13 of the official plan. So for these reasons, planning and development staff recommend that the application be deferred pending this further information as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. If you can just come up to the microphone and give your name and address, and then you can speak with what you would like to.
My name is Ann Hallett, and I live at 1 Grey Street, the only house on that block. I live right across the road. And we're such wonderful neighbors in the whole town. I mean, we each have benches in front of our places that are, people sit on the benches and every day in front of Stephanie's house, in front of my house. And I think it would just be wonderful to have the addition above the store.
We really do have great neighbors in Coldwater.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare that the public portion of this application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on the application? Member Mossy?
Question to staff through the chair. Can you just walk me through 15304 again? What it?
Thank you, Chair. Through to Member Bossy. So Ontario Regulation 15304 is a policy document that's sort of governed by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. It sets out mandatory requirements for certain land use activities that are proposing a change of certain land uses. More specifically, it sets out the requirements for an environmental site assessment or a record of site condition when a developer is proposing to change or add a more sensitive use. So if there's an existing commercial or industrial site and they're proposing to change that use or add a more sensitive use to the site, such as a residence, things like that, it sets out the requirements for those documents to assess the current use of the property as well as any past uses of the property. And then if there is any remediation required, the studies would set out those as well. Essentially, it is to ensure that there's no risks to human health and safety through the proposed development by adding that more sensitive land use.
Member Hawkins?
And the, through the chair. So the record of site condition letter that to receive, can that not be included as a condition on the planning application, that it will be required and it wouldn't be an approved planning application without it?
Thank you, Chair. So the official plan is pretty specific in that it's an application requirement that the municipality can't make a decision without that information.
Through the chair. Is there an ETA or a timeline on that record of site condition to be back to?
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that the chief building official has been in communications with the applicant to provide the updated information to their consultant to assist in the finalization of that document and the exemption letter to demonstrate that the proposal wouldn't be subject to those policies.
So is that something that you think could possibly be done by the next month's meeting, or is that a?
Thank you, Chair, through to Member Hawkins. I'm not sure that would be how soon the applicant and their consultant can provide that information.
Member Mossy.
So just for my question to staff through the chair. So for my clarity, we cannot approve it based on a successful RSC as a, like.
Thank you, Chair. The committee could approve, deny, or defer the application at their discretion. However, they would need to provide reasoning, explaining how it meets the applicable policy documents.
Member Hawkins.
Sorry, just in regards to the parking. So the parking agreement that you spoke about, is that something that's under discussion to move forward with, like a cash in lieu or a parking agreement?
Thank you, Chair, through to Member Hawkins. The applicant was sort of given the different options by the Director of Planning and Development, one being apply for a minor variance or to consider a parking agreement. So it's at their sort of choice to submit the application and attempt to seek a minor variance.
So my one question, my understanding originally was that the parking space was for the commercial use. Is the parking space for that, or is it more for the residents that would be upstairs?
Through to the chair. So the parking provisions that the applicant is seeking relief from is associated with the introduction of that additional accessory dwelling unit. The zoning bylaw is specific that for every accessory dwelling unit on a commercial property, there needs to be one required parking space.
Member Vandergeest.
More of a comment rather than a question. I understand what you're trying to do. I get that. It's hard for me to sit in this chair and provide that planning justification to approve that application when I'm not a planner. I'm a member of the public that is on this committee to review the applications and provide a vote of support or denial or support of a deferral to the application. I understand what you're trying to do. I agree with what you're trying to do. But I also would support a deferral tonight. I understand costs and all that can get out of hand, but from my perspective, I can't sit here tonight and provide that justification on the support of the application that it meets the fourth test of the Planning Act. So that's where I sit tonight. So I would be in support of a deferral. That's my opinion, my comment.
I would say I echo Member Vandergeest's comments. I also am not a planner and can't provide proper justification to be able to, I would say, recommend approval of this. So I think I would be in support of a deferral as well. I think at this time, if we vote on that and see how the committee votes. Can get a motion. Motion COA 2024-059, moved by Member Hiles, seconded by Member Vandergeest, that staff report D24-040 be received, and further that minor variance application be deferred pending further information, including the need for a record of site condition per the requirements of the Township Official Plan and Ontario Regulation 153.04, additional analysis and planning justification to demonstrate how the requested variance conforms with the prescribed policy and tests without the benefit of a parking agreement. We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You're free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the adjournment. I can get a motion for adjournment. Motion COA 2024-060, moved by member Vandergeest, seconded by member Bossy. The Committee of Adjustment meeting be adjourned at 7:35 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. We are carried.